rule. That is the purpose of the world. It is the nature of God who is good to do good. And Amalek wants to ensure that that never happens. This cannot be a world where goodness is what rules. So, as long as people are making half-hearted attempts and there's no real plan, he doesn't have a real problem. We don't know, we don't hear about him so much. Amalek is the side of Macbeth's question. It's Macbeth, right? To be or not to be? So his answer is not to be. That's what he is. Hamlet. Thank you. There's something wrong in Denmark, not in Scotland. So that's what he wants. And when he senses that the Jewish people are about to receive the word of Hashem that will change, and it changed the world completely. So he has to attack. He has to find a way to divert us, to stop us from our plans. And so he shows up at every juncture when we are either weak or very strong, one or the other. And his plan is always the same: chaos, death, and destruction. There's nothing else that he's interested in. It's the root of all terrorism in the world. And this is, how long has this been going on? Since the moment we came out of Mitzrayim, 3,000 years. This is what's been going on. This is what he's about. 3,500 years. Why attack us? He doesn't only attack us. Any place that he senses that is getting to become too good, he'll attack. In the 20th century, Amalek showed up. Who is this Amalek? Amalek is not a nation anymore, because that nation doesn't exist. It's an idea. It's like some kind of virus of the mind that comes and says, I have to stop the world from becoming good. I have to find any way I can. And as a virus, it attacks people that are susceptible to it, and it takes over them and their countries and their leadership and their resources, and it'll churn it against the good in the world. So in the 20th century, we know where this virus attacked. In Germany, it attacked them very hard. It infiltrated completely. It took over everything. And it took all the resources of that country, plus everything else it could get its hands on, and aimed not just to destroy the Jewish people, but to make sure, not just the Jews that were in Germany or anywhere else, that it was strong enough to conquer the entire world, not because they were interested in power, not because they were interested in territory. None of these things are true. These are lies that they told everyone. But one thing, and we know this one thing, to destroy the Jewish people, because the Jewish people were coming close to Geula. They were coming closer and closer. The consciousness was changing. And we began to feel that whatever held us back for 2,000 years was falling from us, whatever this was. And this was happening everywhere in the Jewish world. Some people felt it as some kind of political rejuvenation, and a lot of people began to feel it as a spiritual rejuvenation. And that's when he attacked. And he tried to stop us. That's his goal. That's all he does. So what is this mitzvah? Is this mitzvah meant to tell us that we now have to be a McCarthy-type police and try to figure out what every single person in the universe thinks? It's not practical, and it's not the way the Jews think. It's a mitzvah that doesn't have a father and mother. Nobody will take responsibility for it. What kind of a mitzvah is it? So what I want to say tonight is that this mitzvah is not meant to be at all the mitzvah, for instance, like learning Torah. Learning Torah, you have a mitzvah to learn Torah, you have to find time for it, learn Torah, perform the mitzvah. Amalek is like a moral imperative, meaning, or a moral license, let's call it. It's coming and saying, I know you, my dear Yidden, you're very, very soft people. Really. You only want goodness. You only want to think about the day after. You only want to think good things. You want to be positive. You want to be optimistic. You want to be kind to everyone. Hashem is telling us you have a moral license when it comes to Amalek to destroy them as if you were like them. You have to understand this, because these people that are affected by this virus, and again, it's a virus, it's not in people, it's not the descendants of Amalek today. You will not be able to fight them unless you have the moral license. And I can't read it now in English, but pretty much what it says in Kitetse is Taf ve'yonek, babies and sucklings, ish ve'isha, man and woman. Every single animal has to be destroyed. You cannot leave anything. And I know you, says Hashem. I know what you're like. You can't tolerate things like this. But I'm telling you, when you face them, that's what you have to do. Nothing less. And again, you say, where's the moral imperative? Where do I get the moral license for this? Says Hashem, this is what this mitzvah is. By the way, let's say we go and we tell them, this is what we're going to do. And they say, we give up. We have no need to pursue them. This is halacha also. One of these people who yesterday wanted to destroy us, comes and says, I want to be megayer. I want to become a convert. Alam b'salam. You're welcome. Because there's no idea here that we have to go seek them out. When they show their face, and when they do what they do, we have to have the moral license to fight them the right and proper way, which is the only way to destroy them. Now, I've already talked about this, so whoever was there will know that that's what happened. That's how World War II ended. When the Allies decided that they were not going to get into any kind of ceasefire, treaty, peace with Germany. The decision was unconditional surrender. Unconditional surrender means I destroy you until you raise the white flag and you say, I can't anymore. That's how you fight this war. There's no other way to do it. The Allies were smart enough to understand this, and that's what they did. We also have to be smart enough to understand this. And the truth is that you listen to all the voices from the West, anyone, not all this Amalek that's here in between and is carrying the same virus. But you listen to the people who count, and they all say the same thing. You have license to destroy them. The only problem really is, the Jews don't know their mitzvot. And they don't think, again, who's the Jews? The leadership in Eretz Yisrael doesn't know this mitzvah. It doesn't understand this moral imperative. Even if it understands it to some degree, it has never studied it seriously. They don't know what it really means. And so they try to continue to be moral. And morality is out of the window in this case. There is no such thing here. That's what this mitzvah is saying. It's saying that when you have to go and deal with them, this is the only way to deal with them. The moment they raise the white flag, you can think, what do you want to do? Do you want to continue to obliterate them, or do you want to stop? It's up to you. The Torah doesn't tell you you have to obliterate them. The Torah doesn't tell you that you shouldn't. You need to make up your mind. You can leave them, like with every war, a corridor to flee if they want to flee. You're allowed to. There's no reason not to. You're also allowed to come and say to them, do you want to make peace? By the way, this is something that maybe sounds strange, but you're allowed to say that. There's nothing that forces you to go and obliterate them. But once you've made the decision, you have the license. The Torah says you have the moral license to do this. Who can do this? According to most of the opinions, only a king. Meaning, it can't be an individual, a Jew, one guy who thinks, I'm going to fight the war for the entire world. This is the war that only the Jewish people as a collective can engage in. Meaning, the license can only be given to the people as a collective. So now, with all this in mind, David is not a king yet. So he doesn't have the moral license to destroy them. So he doesn't destroy all of them. He leaves the corridor. And like we just read, there were 400 young men that fled on camels. And he doesn't pursue them because he doesn't have to. He only needs one thing, in this case, which is to retrieve the hostages that they took. Because they didn't kill anyone, apparently. They only took hostages. They burnt the city down. The city then wasn't like Los Angeles, obviously. It was like a little village with everything made out of thatched roofs or whatever they had. And that's what they mean by they burned it down. And they took all the hostages. But now I want to focus on what are the stages that David goes through in this war that he does. The first stage, when he comes and he discovers that the city was burned down and that everyone was taken hostage, the first stage is that they weep. And it says here, they wept until they had no more strength to weep. Okay. What does that mean? Why? If you just discovered that all your women and children have been taken hostage, what would you do? What would everyone expect you to do? You need to go and pursue. Why do you sit there and weep? Like you have nothing that you can do. You're powerless. The truth is you are powerless. Why are you powerless? Not because you're not a good warrior and not because you don't know how to fight. When some calamity happens to us, the first reaction has to be tshuva. If I don't do tshuva first, there will be no success afterwards. It's the first principle of anything negative that happens to me. I have to, chatati aviti pashati. I have to admit before God that something with me is wrong. And to weep until you have no more strength to weep means that you do tshuva to the extent that you are looking for what is wrong with us. It's not so hard to think what was wrong with David and his people. We just told the story. You're going to make some kind of deal with the Philistines and play games with them, and this way you'll fight them. And what are you talking about? You don't make deals with these people. You can't be a fifth column in someone else's army. Luckily, it didn't work out. But even the thought, it's very clear, is wrong. Because that's how the whole thing started. They went off to meet with the Philistines. They had to leave their wives and children. And so the Amalekites came. What do they come? When do they come? When you are weak. They're making these false treaties with the Philistines is a sign of weakness, not of strength. It's very hard not to notice the connection to our times. That you think you're showing strength, this story is telling you what you're showing is only weakness. The people want to stone David. His 600 warriors. What do they want to do now? Stone him. They want to kill him. Who made all these decisions? Who led us astray with these false notions of peace with the Philistines, of somehow living with them and making a deal and all these agreements? Who's to blame for all of this? Who took us to this crazy idea, crazy campaign of joining the Philistines to fight Saul? Who came up with this thing? You, David. Doesn't always mean that when you do tshuva, you get the right idea, you get the right answer. Sometimes you do tshuva and you say, yeah, something wrong. But you don't do tshuva well enough, and then you say, okay, here are the blame. When there's tshuva to be done, every person has to come out with the recognition of what I did wrong. And I did something wrong. So even if some other government signed these terrible agreements, we carry some of the blame. And that has to be the conclusion of every process of doing tshuva. And so they want to stone David because their conclusion was David's to blame. Luckily, it doesn't happen that way. And it says that David strengthened himself with Hashem. What does it mean he strengthened himself with Hashem? He threw off these people that want to stone him. He put them in their place somehow. And he came out and said, I take the responsibility and I will also set this thing straight. That's what he said. In some way, he suddenly looked at them again like a leader, and not somebody who was philandering, trying to make all kinds of strange deals. He connected again with Hashem. All these deals were not with Hashem. All these deals didn't come from a place of holiness. They came from trying to maneuver. But they weren't simply being with Hashem and doing the right thing. So David strengthens himself, and he looks to them again like a leader. And the next stage is, so this is all the first stage. This is called submission. Submitting before Hashem, doing tshuva. Then comes the second stage. What's the second stage? It's not just to strengthen with Hashem, but to be connected to Hashem enough that you understand what He wants. And at this stage, what David is doing is he's using his ability to be prophetic at some level. We don't know if he was a full prophet. There's a whole sikh of the Rebbe trying to understand about this ephod, what exactly it was. Was it full prophecy? Was it the type of prophecy? Here in the Steinsaltz translation, he chose to say that the ephod was entirely the Urim and Tumim. It was something completely different. There's all kinds of different ways to explain it, but they all go in the same direction, which is, I want to know, what does Hashem want from me now? I got into this trouble because I left Hashem. The first stage is tshuva. I'm back to you, Hashem. If Hashem is really with me now, then He will tell me, and I will be able to unite with Him in such a way that I will know for sure what needs to be done. And so here it shows up as David asks. He asks as if it were from Hashem. Shall I pursue this troop? Will I overtake it? And he receives an answer. And again, what these answers looked like in that time, it's very hard for us in the 21st century to imagine exactly how this worked. Could it be a baskol that came out? Could it be something else? Whatever it was, it became clear that Hashem's will is that you pursue and you will win. This is the second stage. We call this stage separation. Why is it separation? Separation means that I'm separating the evil out of myself and I'm uniting with the good. Or another way of saying it is, I identify now with the good in me. The good in me is Hashem in me. And this Hashem has something to say. When I identify with the goodness in me, I become aware of what the right thing to do is. As long as I'm confused, mixed up, I have the good side and the negative side, and I don't know who I identify with. Am I a person of God? Am I a person who's looking for his betterment? Who am I? So all the decisions are confused. Separation means I push away my lower self. I push away my ulterior motives. I push away my material needs. And I ask, what is the goodness in me, my neshama, my divine soul, what does it say? Then I get a real answer of what needs to be done. And so here David hears that the right answer is to pursue them. And so he pursues them. And he overtakes them. It's interesting that on the way, he finds an Egyptian slave boy. Also, I don't know what they did with this piece of information for about 3,000 years since this was written. For us, it's tremendously meaningful. You find an Egyptian who now can either help you or not help you, but he makes you vow that you don't hurt him. Maybe that's what we need to do. I promise you we won't hurt you. Now, do you want to help us or not? You want to tell me everything that you know, all the intelligence that you have about this place? Right? Again, I don't know what they thought for 3,000 years. Who cares about this Egyptian kid? Like, what's this even doing here? And he pursues, and he eradicates whoever he does. And again, he leaves a room for some of them to escape. Because what he's interested is only really in one thing, to free the women and children. That's what he wants. There's a final stage after this that is called sweetening. The sweetening means that now you have to find a way to turn this whole story into something empowering for you and those around you. You can't finish with just a victory. Victory is not enough. There has to be, you can't just achieve your goals. The real purpose of this, we said, is that you did something wrong to begin with. So you can't end by just undoing what happened. You have to actually, to really do tshuva, there has to be a sweetening at the end that you climb to a new level. You reach a new level. That level you should have had before. The end of the story is, I'll say this very quickly, is that David finds a way to sweeten this whole story. Remember that when they were pursuing, they had to divide into two parts. 400 were able to pursue, they were strong enough, and 200 were left behind with the equipment at the ravine of Besor. So when they came back not just with their wives, their children, and their possessions. They came back with all the loot that this Amalekite troop had stolen, and we heard the different cities, Caleb, and there was a whole series of cities that they had invaded. And now all this loot belongs to David and his men. So the 400 who pursued with David say the loot should be divided only between us, because we were the ones who actually fought. And David says something amazing. He says, no, this is not the way to do it. Everyone who was involved, even those who were left with the equipment and did not pursue, they also should receive an equal share in the spoils. What was he doing? He was saying, it doesn't matter if you're strong, it doesn't matter if you're weak, it doesn't matter if you were on the right side of the war or the wrong side of the war. In the end, the victory belongs to all of us, the loot belongs to all of us, we're all equal before Hashem. And the Parsha ends with the writer, whoever wrote this story, saying, and from that day on, this became the halacha in the Jewish people. So what did David end up doing? He created a sense of unity. Again, this was their world. In their world, how you divide the loot was how you create a sense of unity between people. For us, probably wouldn't be anything like that. It would be something else. But he created this sense of unity. That this whole thing was meant in the end to bring us closer together. That was the whole purpose. When you understand the story in this way, you understand what needs to be done today. There has to be, first of all, tshuva. Did those Everybody has to do tshuva. Hard to say that we didn't do tshuva. Only people who might have not done tshuva are those in power. They might be the only ones who didn't. But that's usual for them. They never do tshuva. Some of them already came out and said we were wrong. But did they come out and say we were wrong to make all these agreements? Did they come out and do tshuva in the way that we expect them to, which is to rescind Oslo, to stop thinking that way, to stop thinking about the land as something that they are going to use as a card to trade? Did they stop thinking now that Jewish lives are something that you play with? I'm not sure at all. In fact, I'm almost convinced that they didn't yet. But the first step is that you do tshuva. Did the people who caused, I have to tell you, the worst year of my life in Israel was the last year. Not after Simchas Torah, before Simchas Torah. The worst year I've ever experienced there. There wasn't a war, there wasn't so much inflation, there wasn't Corona, there was none of these things. The hatred that was felt in the streets, I have never felt anything like that anywhere. I'm not just talking in Eretz Yisrael, I'm talking about anywhere that I've been in the world. It was unbelievable. There needs to be a lot of tshuva then. Then comes the stage after you can't weep anymore. Then you come and you say, okay, we have to do something. What do we need to do? Who's being asked what needs to be done? I don't know. Are they asking an Urim and Tumim? Do they have an Urim and Tumim? Is Biden their Urim and Tumim? I don't know. But you gather all the wise men together and you ask, so what do we do now? What does Hashem say we need to do? There's no name of Hashem there. The soldiers, they know the truth. It's unbelievable. The gap between the leadership and the healthy people, the healthy Am Yisrael, is unreal. Everybody knows about the tzitzis already. The tzitzis, it's hard to ignore that this is like the ephod that David wears. It's like they all feel this. Where did this even come from? Nobody even told them. They just suddenly decided. There was a story that sort of came out on the third day, but it was long after people were asking for tzitzis. It's like it came from below. There's a whole question that Rav Ginsburg once talked about, why the Rebbe never made a mitzvah tzitzis. Why is it only a mitzvah tefillin? Simple reason is because about the tefillin it says that they will fear you if you wear it. But here, one might say that it's not about that they fear us or don't fear us. People needed to feel protected. The tefillin are not so much about protection. In the time of the Rebbe, that's what it was possible to do, to make them fear you. Now they want to feel protected. You read the Sidoros, now you read I don't know. But it came out spontaneously from the people themselves. And so the soldiers know this. Everybody who's, not just the soldiers, everybody who's pretty much the people of Israel know this. And everybody is using and calling out, and except for the media and the leadership, everybody has Shem Shamayim Shagul B'fi Kol. The name of the Shem is on everybody's lips all the time. And that's how everybody feels. That this is not just, and they began to understand that this is not some skirmish, this is not some enemy like the Egyptians. This is something entirely different. Very quickly, the language changed. This is not, well, it's because people don't understand, but what do they say? These are Nazis. Yeah. Nazis were just the latest incarnation of this virus. This is Amalek. This is what it is. And what people want is to eradicate them. They're not talking about the people. What they want is, what are you talking about humanitarian aid? What in the world are you talking about? Why? It's like a clear, definite understanding that the only way to solve this is to eradicate them completely. How do you do that? What strategy do you need to use? You've got the hostages, same as David. You pursue them until they can't move. How do you do that? Exactly what strategy you use, that doesn't matter. But it's very clear that this has to be a fight against Amalek, against, again, the word Nazi almost doesn't have any meaning next to Amalek. It's just Nazism happened to be the latest incarnation of this thing called Amalek. And the whole reason, and you see it, why did they do it? Because they're so bloodthirsty. What's the reason? Somebody just before I walked in sent me this whole analysis that this is actually an agreement between Russia and Iran and this and that. They don't act because of agreements. They act to create chaos. They don't care. They act to stop the Jewish people from the next step, which is all the Arab countries coming and agreeing that we have a right to Eretz Yisrael. That was the next step. It was very close already. And they saw this, and they said, we have to stop it in some way. Because if we don't stop it, the world might become a better place. God forbid. They need to stop it. Everybody knows that. I think everybody realizes that that was the first casualty of everything that happened. Apart from their butchery and their acting like pogromniks, same thing. Maybe even worse than everything we've seen, but I think it's pretty much on par. They want chaos. They don't want our program to succeed. Our program that brings peace to the world, that brings goodness to it. That's all the Jewish people are about. That's all the Torah is about. Lo yarda Torah le'olam, the Torah did not come down into the earth, ela la'asot shalom, but to make peace in the world. That's his whole purpose. And because of that, there's hatred. Because some people are stricken by this virus that they want to create chaos. So the short and long of it is, in the end, that you have to have these three stages in every war that you fight. If there's a war, you have to do tshuva. And then you have to find out what is it that your good side, that understands the goodness of Am Yisrael, that understands what we stand for. What is my good side, my divine soul? What does it say? And when I consult the Torah, what it says is this is Amalek, and it needs to be eradicated. And then the sweetening at the end is that this can't just be a victory. It has to lead to a higher degree of unity. It has to lead to a different sense about our responsibility for one another. I'll end with this because it's been over an hour already, but one of the things that before I came to America now, and I said it was very difficult to leave, just before I came, Rav Ginsburg's main secretary, the one who does everything in Hebrew, he also was here for 5 days. He also, not in Los Angeles, he was in New York. We had planned this trip a month ago, and he asked Rav, what should I do? He said, you should go. We don't change plans. And I talked to him before I left, and he said, it's going to be good for you, you'll see. I asked him why. He says, because two things you're going to see. One is you'll see that the Jews understand something different now. They feel different. In the same way that in Eretz Yisrael, everybody is in trauma, in America, you'll see that people may be a little bit in trauma, but the main thing is, Baruch Hashem, that we have people that didn't experience this trauma firsthand, and what they feel is a sense of unity with every other Jew. That's what they feel. And there's a whole story about this, if somebody wants to hear it, about something that happened when I was in Oxnard on Shabbos, and it was one of these incredible displays of exactly that point, that people are looking now to connect with other Jews. They're looking for this. They need this. And not to mention the incredible giving that we've seen from every corner of the Jewish world, and not just from Jews. That was the second thing, that you see the world splitting down. Not the middle, I think it's more like 3/4 and a quarter, that 3/4 of the world is decent and understands the difference between good and evil. And you hear words of support everywhere you go. So it started with the moment that I landed, and I spent almost 45 minutes at the customs and border because the guy couldn't let me go. He had to talk to me more and more about what we were going through and how he was with us and so on. And from then on, every single place that I've been, literally people coming up and crying, non-Jews. Some of them Christians, some of them not. And a simple understanding that there is a war here for our consciousness. There is a war going on for the world. What is the world going to be? So with that, I leave you with these words. And I'm sure that in every community, everybody feels these things, and to strengthen the unity between us, to strengthen the unity of other many, many, many people of goodwill around you, and even invite them and talk to them and explain to them what Yiddishkeit stands for, and explain to them what Torah stands for. And those who have a Christian background understand this almost naturally. They almost don't need an explanation. There's also a lot of other people that need this explanation. They need to know that Yiddishkeit and Torah are the source of good and kindness and peace in the world. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes or no?
Yeah.
No. I think this week's parsha, the past parsha, Abraham comes back from the war of 4 and 5 and 11, and he doesn't want anything from Sodom. But he says these guys that stayed with the bags, and these guys that fought, they get to take their. So there was a precedent.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a precedent from the war of Midian, that after they got back, the warriors got the lion's share, but everybody else shared it. So David didn't make it up.
No, he didn't make it up. It just wasn't a halacha until David.
What?
That's what he said. It just wasn't a halacha until David.
Anyway, so one other point. I mean, I have 20 other points, but I'll just do one more. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says that Hashem questioned David why you're going from the Chamas Rishis to Syria. Ram, what are you doing there? You didn't finish the Milchemes mitzvah of conquering the
Eretz Yisrael.
So you see, not all of David's wars were pure profit. He was fighting all the other wars. He just didn't finish them first before he went to the Rishus. The Gemara there says very clearly that they came to David and said, your people need parnasa. And he wasn't collecting for himself and for his treasury. He said for his treasury. So he wasn't. He said let them go and fight a war, and then they can have treasury. It wasn't like he just said go attack these people and take their money away. There's a I would mean to say you have to eradicate evil from the world. But his wars were not all
again the Gemara
for his own treasury.
Not for his treasury. Is that for the? Okay, so what I meant was that the Jewish people needed parnasa. That's it.
They couldn't just raise it from the inflation they were having at the time in their economy. They had to go do a Chamas Rishus. So I mean that's an agreement. The other thing is the ephod was the earning. It lights up. The answer lights up. Like Eliab going at that.
So I already said that there's a very big there's a whole sikha from the Rebbe about what this ephod was. Was it a real ephod of a prophet? I said 100%. I said that that's also an opinion, and that's what Mishnah brings. I don't think he needs defending, but we need to know what went wrong. And what went wrong is that you have to fight wars not for material gain. That's not the reason to fight wars. You just said you did. You just quoted the Gemara. That's what the Gemara says. That they asked, what should we do? He said, go consult with Doeg and with Yoav. So with Doeg and Achitophel. Doeg and Achitophel says, go ask Yoav what to do. So Yoav says, the only way I can fill the treasury, is if I go and fight Moab now. He says, oh, go and fight Moab. So they asked David, what should we do? He says, whatever Yoav says, go and do it. It was a not only he almost lost that war, because of that, very clearly, it says that he didn't build the Beis Hamikdash. So read the Gemara again, you'll see. Yeah, the Gemara there says that is the reason why he didn't build the Beis Hamikdash, because his wars were not the right wars. Instead of it, again, this is a very what do you call a very marginal point in the whole. That's something else.
And so therefore that's not because of the sin.
No. Because of these wars, read and discussed in Chassidus in length. It's discussed in length, and I'll send you the articles if you want. That the reason for this are these that explain that Gemara, and the reason is because these wars were unwarranted. You shouldn't have fought these wars. Okay. So, thank you very much. There's a story that Amichai Eliyahu says that there was some high official, not in the Vatican, someone in the Italian government, he doesn't say who it is, who said to him, I want to talk to you about these things that we have in our. He doesn't speak for the Vatican, he speaks for the Italian government, and we don't even know who he is, because he's not willing to disclose the name. This, by the way, happened 4 weeks ago. It wasn't something that just happened now. Yeah, it now became more famous because somebody, because Amichai Eliyahu started talking about it. He's a minister in the government. He's Rabbi Eliyahu's son. So he started saying that somebody called me up. He says, I've been trying to reach you for a long time, and I need to talk to you about, and he said something like, we don't need these things. Maybe you need them. Maybe you'll do something with them. And one of the things he cited was their negative birth rate, that Italy is going to disappear in 50 years or in 100 years or whenever it is. That, I don't know about that. I'm sorry, I'm much too cynical to think that someone who has no say in the Vatican is able to make something like that happen. But if the Vatican would come and say that, I would be more interested.
And Governor Mel made this inside deal with
Chish.
So you don't see that he was trying to insulate or infiltrate himself within the army of.
That's what I said. It was a fifth column.
Protect Jewish lives, you know?
Again, it was a fifth column. Yeah.
You're calling it a sin that he did this?
I didn't say it was a
He had
sin.
no other way to get ahead of the curve, to go out there to defend Claudius.
Of course he could.
What was he supposed to do?
Attack them.
Attack him right then and there?
No, he could have attacked them during the war. He didn't have to come with them. 100%. You know what it sounds to me like? Since this is what you're saying. So my answer to that is, it sounds to me exactly like the maneuvering that people had with good intentions to do Oslo, to do this, to do that, to protect Jewish lives. It doesn't protect anyone.
What was that supposed to do the war against him to defend Claudius when they came to attack Shaw? How was he supposed to get there and turn around and fight them?
Now you're asking me questions that I can't answer because I'm not accusing.
The decision he made was the wrong decision. What was the right?
It's clear that it was a wrong decision because look at the aftermath. I don't have to be a genius to understand that he made the wrong decision because Hashem heard him afterwards. You know, you have to look at things logically. If nothing would have happened, okay, maybe it was a possibility. But he himself, why are they crying? Because they understand that they did something wrong. What's the conclusion? They want to stone him. Why? Because of his decisions. They don't want to stone him because they stopped liking him. He said, you caused this calamity. You made us made this strange treaty with the Philistines. Because of that, we left our women and children behind. If it wasn't for all your maneuvering, we wouldn't be in this position. I can't see it more clearly, but if you have a different theory for why all this happened, I'm happy to hear it. Again, this is so we can do shaklatari on it, but not to see that what I'm saying has some validity. So anyway.
We're doing marriage, we have 6 people on the
What?
Probably very soon.
That's
That's okay, good. Thank you, that was great. That was things, this, okay, I have to record it, but even a little bit.
Just, whatever you need it for, and we'll see. Thank you for all your